I added a welding outlet underneath my panel in the garage so that I can run my new plasma cutter and MIG welder on 220 instead of 110. One change that I did make on the plasma cutters, I took the barb fitting that was here for the clear hose that came with the unit, and I exchanged it for a swivel fitting that goes right to an air compressor fitting, and that makes it much easier to connect and disconnect. So I'm gonna play around a little bit on this part of the side panel, as this is not gonna be used, so that gives me a little bit of metal to practice on before I actually start cutting where I need to. 18 gauge steel, which is about 0.04 inches, which is about 3/64. When we look on the table, for 3/64 we have 20 amps and 30 psi. So I preset the psi set point already, and now we can go and dial this back to 20. Let's get cutting. Well, here we go. See how this works. So the first pass was this swirly one. Second pass, I tried to follow this line, see if I can cut this piece out. A couple of times you kind of heard it swish up a little bit. That was really me having the torch too far from the object, but it seems to be cutting through it pretty easily. So the learning there was that the first pass I was going way too fast. Just because it sizzles doesn't mean that it's actually cutting. So there were still pieces that connected this metal to this metal. And so I did a second pass, I just went slower, and that seemed to do a lot better. As you can see, I made some marks to where I want to cut this. Then I put a threaded rod down as a guide rail so I can hold my tip against that. Hopefully get a straight line. So we'll see how that goes. So here's what we're seeing. We are cutting, but it almost seems like after the cut, it welds itself shut again. So instinctively, I would think that that means that we're not throwing enough heat at it, but I could be wrong about that. I'm gonna do a little research before we continue. I'm gonna try and freehand the opposite side. It's only a short edge, so we'll try that. work of that. As you can see, I set up another guide for this pass right here. So we'll give that a go. Those are the edges, not cleaned up yet. But you can see that with an edge, you can get pretty good cuts. Switching gear a little bit, we're gonna start cutting the frame here. There's some leftover material right here from the first layer that I took off. I want to take that off with this edge here, so it stays on the pinch weld. That way we have the strength of the metal there. See how we can do with this. That goes pretty good. Easy cut there. So we'll continue towards the back. Wow, I like that a lot. Took a minute to take off the first layer of skin here in this area. Just being careful to not hurt anything inside. There's some holes that you can, well, not this one because it was covered up, but this one and this one. Kind of shine a flashlight in there, kind of see what you see. Obviously we got some electrical going on here. You want to see where that's at. So when you're cutting, you're not setting stuff on fire. I think one of the next steps I'm gonna be doing is making this cut along here, all the way over to here, so we can start taking this off. Boom, and that's how quick it goes. This is really nice, I'll tell you what. Well, I ran out of consumables for the plasma cutter. Unfortunately, it only comes with 2 tips, so it is a little bit of cutting. I went through those, beginner's luck, I guess. But show must go on, so we still have the standby grinder. So right now we see that we have all of this cut. All of this is cut all the way back to this flange. And we're currently working on getting rid of the A-pillar arm here. That is very well constructed with good reason. Multiple layers and hard to get rid of, so it's a bit of work. Little update. Cut out the speaker shelf out of the back, took the rear bumper off. And that means right now it looks like this on the back end. Got this tower off that the shelf was against, and then this part here, got this part out, and then that's the tower that's gonna get next to look more like that, and that probably have to get trimmed down even more, but just gotta make sure that we got some space to work in. Some of the electrical stuff was mounted on the outside of here and here. That is now living here, as we also end up cutting this short to make sure that because this car is much longer than the 67, so we got to make sure we cut the back end off. But there's a bunch of stuff living under here, so there's this cooler and some other stuff that we need to attend to, so that's going to be another puzzle piece that we need to figure out. The back panel also needs to go, so I'm looking to make this cut, get that out of the way, and from there we can take these back panels out, see how that goes. Like that. You got an easy loading platform. All right, so not a little test fit after all the cutting that we've done. So here we're close as far as this meeting up with this. It's got to go a little bit more that way in order for this to really sink in. Clearly, and we haven't done anything here yet, but the cowl area here will need work for this part to go into here. This part I left a little bit longer than what Chris and the Bees for Build crew did on purpose, because I saw they had a large gap that then later had to fill in, which obviously them pioneering this was sort of an estimated guess for them to be able to get the panels in, and I'm learning from that. So I left it a little bit longer, and then the question is, okay, what do we do here? I mean, I could cut this straight off so it could sink in there as well. But I don't know if I need a little bit of that piece there just as a transition there to the fender, so it doesn't look like there's nothing there. So TBD. Then we come back here. Now we're sitting reasonably at the height where we're gonna be over here. We're a little bit low over there yet. I'd have to turn one of these wood blocks sideways to get that at a better height probably, but as that comes up, this may lower a little bit too. Right now we're just hitting here, but the other part where we're hitting is here. So we may have to do a little trimming on these two pieces, maybe just these corners here, just to let that sit down. Another difference that I did is I left the fenders intact, since as I said before, I believe I'm going to be running the 19-inch wheels. I want to make sure that I can house those, and I know the other guys, they cut this. I want to see where this ends up once I put the quarter panel on it, because I also want to build wheel arches for the bigger wheels. So I may leave this in place and we can just build off of that. Okay, so that's nice and straight now for the body to sit on. Now to figure out the next steps. All right, so here's where we're at. We can see that pretty well lines up with that. So we're in the right plane when we go up and down like this. So we're pretty well where we need to be on this plane. This side is maybe an eighth, 3/16 low. This is just a hair high. But what we can also see now is that we have made room in this area for this to sink into. Now, we're still, could have probably left a little bit more, but that's okay. This gives us a little bit of room to wiggle, also to get in if we have to weld a big plate, a vertical plate here. So that gives me some room to get in between to weld this to that metal plate. So yeah, I think that's good. The reason that this still sits high is that this is floating. However, that in the back is still hitting right there. So we're gonna trim that a little bit more and see that we can get the sill to sit the way it needs to over there. Once we get that where we want it, then I'm gonna come over here and trim this piece. I'll probably leave maybe half of it So if I do that, I'll have to cut this a little bit more for that to sink in. And while I have it up here, I may make some marks so I know where I'm going. There, made room for the front part. Little hiccup, this piece was an actual shelf here, so that's why this piece didn't come out as one piece. And then over here, you have parts of the hinge plate that was back here yet, and it's cut through there. So sometimes you can't cut the whole thing at once, and you just have to have a step-by-step approach. You just cut a small piece, cut another piece, cut another piece to get to the end result. So we have space here. This is gonna sink into there. There's space here. This is gonna sink into there. This is pretty well aligned where we need to be. Now that we cut that little corner off the back end, I believe we're sitting where we need to be there too. And now the only thing really that's holding us up from really putting it where it needs to be is the cowl area. There, that takes care of that strip. And now that gives us access to the cowl area where we can take all that out. So I'm working on taking out the cowl. That is going to allow this piece to finally merge into this area. Now, are we there yet? No, not quite, but we're getting much closer. So this is a fairly good fit. We are very close with our overlap from this piece onto this piece. We have about the finger's width that we're sitting high currently over the sill. So that whole assembly still needs to go down. But clearly we have some work to do in this area for that to work. And then towards the back, we're underneath the fender. And again, this has got to come down a little bit, so this piece will stay clear, which is good. And then in the back, we have the clearance there. And we are sitting somewhat on the fender over here, but you know, if need be, we can obviously take this rib off, and we can even trim the panel a little bit further if we need to. But we are getting closer and closer. Just to get this A-arm piece out, that's all that steel right there. And there's also some pieces that actually fell inside the abyss somewhere. That will probably come out once I start taking this piece off. I already took the skin, the front skin off of this area, right there. And then the next step will be to set this all the way down and over. And then I copied the line of what I did on the other side, cut out for the panel to sit in there. And so we repeated the process on the passenger side. Of course, this side went a lot quicker, considering you kind of figure out what it's got to look like after doing the first side. So next step will be to get the other side rail in and make the appropriate adjustments, cutting off the excess in that piece and then getting it mounted on this too.